I was halfway through my second sip of burnt office coffee when I heard it. One of the new hires chirping in the break room about her sign-on bonus. Said it like it was a Starbucks order. Yeah, and the base is 63 higher than I expected, so I guess they really wanted me. LOL. 63. As in thousand. I froze mid-scroll, thumb hovering over a tab labeled Q4 Procurement Sync. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Then, her buddy chimed in, "Honestly, we got lucky. They're desperate for fresh blood. Probably why they lowball the vets. They know they're not going anywhere." My throat went dry. I'd been here 10 years. 10 years of weekends blurred into Monday mornings, of covering gaps from layoffs, of training 3 bosses who all left the moment they padded their resumes. I built every renewal calendar they use. I'm the one who knows which vendor freezes shipments when their invoices are 14 hours late. I remember when we still faxed purchase orders to Tulsa. And now some girl who just graduated from Rutgers with an operations psychology degree is making 63 grand more than me to learn from me. If you're listening to this and haven't hit subscribe yet, do it. Seriously. 97% of you never do, and it helps the team out more than you know. Tap that button and like the video so we can keep exposing how loyalty gets you nothing but laughed at in corporate America. I stayed silent as I walked past the break room. Didn't say a word. Didn't let my face twitch. Just sat back down at my cubicle, hands on the keyboard, pretending to review inventory deltas while my vision blurred from rage. Not because I needed more money. I'm not greedy. I just wanted acknowledgement. A little dignity. Maybe not to find out my financial worth from a girl with a glitter Stanley Cup who still thinks Slack is kinda confusing. At 10:05 a.m., I had my one-on-one with my manager, Curtis. I figured I'd handle it like a grown-up. Bring it up plainly, not accusatory, just factual. He blinked too much when I brought it up. Told me he'd circle back with HR. His mouth smiled, but his eyes said he already knew, that this was part of the plan. Said it was market rates, and gave me the corporate shrug. "It is what it is," he muttered, reaching for his hydro flask like the matter was settled. I asked him point blank if he thought that was fair. He sighed and gave me that look. The one men give women when they're tired of pretending to care. "You've got stability," he said. "They're new. They needed incentive." I don't remember walking out. Just remember sitting back at my desk, that phrase, "you've got stability," looping in my head like some sick joke. You know what stability feels like? Like being invisible, like keeping everything running so well that they forget it's even work. That's what loyalty earns you. Eraser status, you're just a moving part. Replaceable until the whole machine cracks and no one remembers how to rebuild it. I clicked open a folder buried deep in my personal drive, titled Contract, Archive, Oversight, 14. Password protected, encrypted. Last modified 4 years ago. I hadn't touched it since the last vendor overhaul. Inside were PDFs, clauses, renewal language, memo chains. One in particular caught my eye. Clause 14D, equal compensation provision under sole source contract agreements. I leaned back in my chair. Turns out I'd written that one myself. The HR rep's name was Stacy, but her eyes said spreadsheet. Friendly voice, polished nails, and a face so smooth you'd swear she's never once frowned at a tax bracket. She pulled up my file with a grin that didn't reach her pupils and said, "I understand you have some concerns about compensation, Owen." "It's not a concern," I replied calmly. "It's a number. 63,000. That's the delta between my salary and the new hire I was assigned to train this morning. Just trying to understand how we got there." She clicked something on her screen, probably logging my attitude under problematic veteran, then said in a tone so neutral it might as well have been AI generated, "Market rates shift. We benchmarked this quarter against industry medians. Offers are tailored to remain competitive." I wanted to ask if competitive meant screwing over the people who kept the lights on through 2 recessions, a ransomware attack, and the great email server implosion of 2021, but I just nodded once. So tenure means nothing. She tilted her head in that patronizing HR way, the kind that says, "I'm about to explain to you why you're being irrational, but I'll code it in empathy so you can't bite me for it." Tenure is valuable, but market rates reflect evolving expectations. The talent pool's shifted. Younger hires have different negotiation strategies. So do older employees, I said flatly. Mine's called walking. That cracked her mask for a second. She glanced at her screen again, maybe to check if I'd signed any NDAs recently. Look, we're not minimizing your contributions, but we're operating in a tight labor market, and we have to make offers that secure talent quickly. This isn't personal. Everything about it was personal. You don't gut a person's value in Excel and call it not personal. You don't hand them a 10-year pin at the holiday party and then ghost them on pay equity. And you sure as hell don't call it strategy when it's cowardice wrapped in jargon. I asked her if the executive team was aware of the discrepancy. She hesitated. The comp decisions are made by a cross-functional committee including Curtis. Curtis, my manager, my you've got stability manager. I didn't even need to ask. I could see it in her eyes. The decision had been made without me, without a single conversation. I was never even a factor, just a cost center with a smile and a spotless record. The guy who always said yes, who ran logistics on snow days, who personally stayed during the storm last year to finish a compliance report by flashlight when the generator failed. I stood up. Slowly. Not angry, not dramatic, just done. I'll circle back, she offered, suddenly cheery. Maybe we can revisit in next quarter's comp cycle. I paused at the door. Don't bother. I'm not waiting for the next cycle to matter. I walked out of that beige cube farm with a calm I didn't recognize. The kind of calm you feel before a storm, not outside, but inside, controlled. A hum behind your ribs. The knowing kind of rage. The kind that doesn't need to yell because it already knows it's right. Back at my desk, I plugged in my backup drive. I wasn't going to make a scene. I was going to make a record. The password was a joke only I would get. Tuesday, 3 a.m. again. Because that's when I usually fix things. When everyone else was asleep and I was knee-deep in some last-minute procurement fire because a vendor forgot a customs form or legal couldn't tell the difference between a subcontractor and a sole source clause. Those quiet hours, no pings, just me and the system humming like it knew who was really keeping the wheels on. The encrypted drive opened with a soft whir. I hadn't touched it since 2019. The folders were still sorted by crisis. MOU disputes, DoD site escalations, billing exception templates, and then the one I clicked now, Fed Contract Amend 2018. Inside, 47 PDFs. Original contracts, renewal forms, compliance memos. Some were flagged in red. Those were the ones I'd personally amended. Clause 14D sat right there, fourth from the top, untouched since the day we passed it through federal review. I clicked it open. It wasn't just legalese, it was leverage, buried in black ink and forgotten signatures. Back in 2018, we renegotiated our sole source vendor contract with the Department of Logistics Procurement Services. A mouthful, I know, but it basically meant Uncle Sam had promised to keep $48 million in annual services running exclusively through us. No bid required, as long as we met performance metrics and complied with their fair labor parity rules. Clause 14D was a side rider, not standard. I wrote it myself with legal watching half interested because nobody thought it would ever be relevant. It said, in exact language, in the event of internal pay disparity exceeding 60% across functionally equivalent roles and absent documented justification, the authorized federal vendor liaison may initiate a reversion to standard bid protocols under Fair Vendor Equity Protections Act Part 12C. Translation. If they paid some shiny new hire more than 60% above someone in the same role and couldn't justify it, I had the right to pull our sole source status. I had signed that clause. Me, not Curtis, not Stacy, me, that alone wouldn't have scared them. But the second page held the kicker. Reversion authorization must be executed by the original signatory to remain valid unless formally transferred via written agreement. They never transferred it. Never even knew it existed, because they didn't bother to ask. Because when I became the authorized federal vendor liaison, it wasn't a title. It was a box someone had to check so the contract could get filed. And I was the one in the room who understood the process. The one who said yes, who stayed late, who dotted the I's, and they never looked again. Their mistake. I pulled up my inbox and opened the email chain from March, when I flagged the salary discrepancies for the first time. No response. I forwarded it twice. Silence. They never thought I'd follow through, because people like me don't. We grumble and sigh and keep the trains running. But I wasn't just a worker bee anymore. I had teeth. Buried in boring documentation, yes, but sharp ones. Federally compliant, clause-backed teeth. I copied clause 14D to a new Word doc and saved it under a new name. Notice reversion auto intent V1. The cursor blinked at the top of the page like it was daring me. I didn't feel vindictive, didn't feel angry. I felt exact, clean, like a scalpel before the cut. They'd handed me a problem wrapped in arrogance and expected me to swallow it. Instead, I was about to feed it back to them. Word for word, line for line, all I had to do was sign. I didn't sleep that night, not out of anxiety, out of precision. There's a difference. Anxiety spirals, precision drills. And I was drilling straight into 10 years of buried oversight, casual disrespect, and digital breadcrumbs that never expected anyone to follow them. I started with payroll exports, quietly pulled from a shared folder labeled HR Reclass FY23 that no one ever removed my access from because I was the one who helped them build the folder structure back when Janice still ran the back end. The spreadsheet was laughably organized. First names only, no role identifiers. Just base pay, bonuses, and job bands coded in ways only the originator would understand. But I understood it. See, I remember when they rolled out those band codes. Band 4A was Senior Ops Specialist. Band 3B was Junior Ops Coordinator. They made a whole presentation on it like it was going to revolutionize retention. All it did was obfuscate who they were screwing and by how much. I filtered to Band 4A, there were 4 of us. Then to Band 3B, there were 7. 2 were new hires I'd onboarded that week. I ran the math. One of them, a logistics optimization associate, fresh out of college with a bullet journal and a puffer vest, was making $137,000. Base. I made $74,000 and had for 3 years. Her role description matched mine word for word in the internal HR system. That's an 85% disparity. 85. I didn't need to hunt for justification. They hadn't filed any. The equity exception column was blank. No promotion pipeline, no specialized credential, no retention bonus memo. Just clean, uncut negligence. Next, I pulled compliance logs. Vendor self-certification forms. Each year, we were required to attest to our adherence to the Fair Vendor Equity Standards. Clause 7 on the form always got rubber stamped. Remuneration must reflect equal role parity within 30% deviation unless justified by demonstrable role expansion or credential requirement. It was in every document, like a ghost whispering through the margins. 30% was the ceiling. They were nearly triple that. I opened the email archive next. Thank God for my habits. I'd BCC'd myself on everything, every time I raised the concern. March, April, August, subject lines like comp parity concerns, internal, and ban 3B4A role alignment, request for audit. All unopened. Curtis had even marked one as spam, which told me more than any reply ever could. Then came the audit trails. Payment logs from when we filed our annual status renewal, digital signatures, timestamps, tick boxes. Guess who filed them every year? Yours truly. Because the authorized liaison title may have been ceremonial to them, but to me, it was binding. I signed my name under every legal affirmation that said we were within 30% deviation. Not Curtis, not Stacy, me. Which meant 2 things. 1, I'd be liable if this ever went federal. 2, I had full justification to pull the fire alarm before it did. I exhaled through my nose, long and low. This wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't even about money anymore. It was about integrity, about the system they thought was just busy work. The one I quietly kept upright while they patted themselves on the back for modernizing culture. I opened a new file. This one was different. I titled it Contractual Disparity, Grounds for Reversion. I began populating it line by line, salary delta evidence, role alignment screenshots, contract clause excerpts, audit trail copies. A forensic case. Not emotional, not bitter, just undeniable. When I finished the draft, I scrolled back to the top and read the opening line aloud, just to hear it in the air. In accordance with Clause 14D of the 2018 vendor renewal, I am initiating the pre-review protocol for sole source status de-escalation due to verified compensation disparity violations exceeding 60% across functionally identical roles. My voice didn't shake. Let them spin it however they wanted. I wasn't documenting to ask anymore. I was documenting to move. The office was empty. Fluorescents buzzing overhead like they were tired too. Every cube was dark except mine. I dimmed the monitor to a soft glow, like I didn't want the walls to notice what I was doing. There was no rush, no dramatic music, just keys clicking one measured sentence at a time. Subject, contractual clause, 14D, notice of vendor status reversion and de-escalation of contractual priority. Every word had weight. Every phrase had backing. I wasn't asking for a raise, wasn't pleading to be seen. I was executing the precise rights granted to me under the contract I helped write, the one no one thought would ever matter, least of all to me. The letter opened cold. In accordance with the provisions outlined in Clause 14D of the 2018 Vendor Renewal Agreement between Company Name and the Department of Logistics Procurement Services, I, as the authorized federal vendor liaison and original signatory of said clause, am submitting formal notice of intent to initiate vendor status reversion and de-escalation of contractual priority. I attached 3 exhibits: salary disparity data, HR system role alignment logs, and the attested annual certifications with my own initials in the margins. Each piece bled with quiet evidence. No color commentary, no emotional phrasing, just numbers and facts and clauses no one else had bothered to read. Page 2 closed with a simple line: pursuant to the reversion provision, sole source status shall be considered suspended pending federal review unless compensatory alignment and justification are submitted within 10 business days. Translation: they had 10 days to fix it or lose $48 million in automatic federal revenue. I hit print. The old brother printer coughed to life, spitting the document out like it knew this one mattered. I didn't rush the signature. I sat back in my chair and read the letter one more time. No typos, no ambiguity, just the steady voice of someone who finally stopped asking and started executing. Then I signed. Pen to paper, no flourish, no dramatic pause, just a clean signature across a clean line. My name beside a title they forgot I had. Authorized Federal Vendor Liaison. I folded the letter and sealed it in a cream envelope. No company logo, just handwriting in black ink. To CEO, Compliance Officer, Confidential. I left it on the corner of the CEO's desk. Not tucked under a pile, not hidden. Just there, centered, deliberate. No one saw me. The night janitor was still vacuuming the far hallway. He didn't look up. As I walked out, I passed the new hire's cubicle. She had a "You got this" sticky note on her monitor and an untouched onboarding manual beside a half-eaten granola bar. She had no idea what system she was now part of, or what it took to keep it from collapsing. I didn't hate her. She wasn't the problem. The problem was upstairs, handing out money like party favors to anyone who said the right buzzwords, while the people who built the damn scaffolding were treated like furniture. I didn't slam the door, didn't look back. By the time the sun came up, that letter would be the most important piece of paper in the building, and I wouldn't even be in it. The CEO got in late, like always, 9:17 a.m., caramel latte in one hand, Bluetooth earpiece in the other, muttering about pipeline visibility to someone who was definitely pretending to care. He didn't notice the envelope right away. His assistant had placed it dead center on the mahogany desk, exactly where he'd want it, next to the meeting printouts he'd never read and the quarterly sales deck he'd pretend to have edited. When he finally opened it, the room went very, very still. He read the letter twice, then a third time, lips moving as if trying to conjure a loophole by sheer repetition. No one else was in the room to witness the exact moment his face dropped. But by 9:42 a.m., legal had been summoned to the corner office with a tone you only hear when someone's about to lose their bonus. Clause 14D, he said flat. Who the hell signed this clause? A junior counsel, no older than the cold brew she carried in, blinked rapidly. That's from the 2018 amendment cycle. Looks like original signatory was Owen Delaney. The name hung in the air like a bad smell. Who? The CEO snapped. Owen, legal repeated. Operations coordinator, he's been with us a while. He's not even in leadership. Why is he authorized? because no one wanted to deal with the feds back then, and Owen was the only one who could read a contract without a glossary, because he'd stepped up when the compliance officer quit mid-cycle and filled out the forms while the board was too busy renaming departments to care, because he was the guy who made things work without needing applause. And now, apparently, he was the guy pulling the thread that held their biggest government contract together. At 10:03 a.m., procurement froze all outbound POs. They couldn't risk pushing any new federal-linked shipments until they clarified status. By 10:11, the compliance lead was unreachable, out of office until Thursday, no backup listed. By 10:17, someone finally checked the government vendor portal, and there it was. Sole source status, suspended pending review. Effective date today. Trigger, initiated via clause 14D, vendor internal pay equity violation. By 10:30, the CEO's office was full. Legal, procurement, HR, 2 panicked VPs, and someone from strategic risk who hadn't been invited but showed up anyway because she smelled fire and figured it was better to be seen near the extinguisher. Curtis, my manager, sat white-knuckled at the end of the couch, blinking like he'd just found a scorpion in his LaCroix. He never said anything. I didn't even know he still had vendor sign-off authority. Legal's response was a single paper-thin whisper. Apparently he did, and still does. They tried to spin it. We can undo this. It's just paperwork. Surely it's not enforceable. But the system didn't care about spin. The feds cared about compliance. They cared about documentation. And the documentation said Owen Delaney, operations nobody, spreadsheet gremlin, ghost in the email chain, had pulled the brake cord. The $48 million wasn't gone, but it was iced. Held in audit purgatory until someone justified why a mid-level federal coordinator with a clean record and original signing authority had flagged a pay disparity breach of over 60%. And nobody could, because there wasn't a justification. They were too used to Owen being the wallpaper, the safe pair of hands, the guy who never complained and always covered for their mess. They never thought to check if he could break things. They sure as hell didn't expect he'd know exactly how. By noon, his absence was the loudest thing in the building. His cubicle was clean. No coffee cup, no notebooks, just a monitor still logged off and a chair no one dared sit in. The janitor said he left quiet. Didn't even look back. They knocked like they expected me to be surprised, like showing up at 7:18 p.m. On a Wednesday night with forced smiles and apologetic eyebrows would somehow make a $63,000 pay gap feel like a clerical error instead of a knife in the ribs. I didn't answer right away. Let them knock twice. When I finally opened the door, they stood there, Melissa from Strategy, polished and brittle in her blazer, like she hadn't stopped working long enough to feel anything real in 5 years, and Raj from Enterprise Operations, trying so hard not to sweat that it made him sweat more. They looked smaller outside the office, like corporate theater actors who'd forgotten their lines the second the script went off book. Owen, Raj started, voice warm with that same tone people use at funerals. Mind if we come in for a minute? We just want to talk. I stepped aside without a word, let them into my living room. No TV on, just a laptop open on the table, a legal pad, a cooling mug of tea. I sat. Didn't offer drinks. Didn't pretend this was a social call. Melissa took the lead, naturally. We just wanted to have a face-to-face. Things have escalated a bit, and we thought maybe if we could walk through it together, we could all find a path forward. I nodded once, slow. Which part escalated for you? The contract reversion or the federal audit trigger? She flinched. Raj chimed in, quick. We understand you're upset, and you have every right. No one's questioning your contributions. You're deeply valued. I waited. Let the silence stretch. Melissa cleared her throat. We weren't aware of the compensation disparity until recently. Had we known... I reached across the table, opened a folder, and slid a printed email thread toward her. Her hand froze above it. This is from March, I said flatly. Then April. Then again in July. Subject lines are pretty clear. Raj scanned the top one, then the second. You could see the moment he realized his name was CC'd on 3 of them. Unread. I flagged the discrepancies. I asked for review. I offered to explain the clause. No one responded. You didn't forget. You ignored. Melissa opened her mouth, closed it again. The weight of the facts pressed in. Look, she finally said softer now. We're not here to litigate. We're just trying to find a way to de-escalate. The vendor status, if that goes sideways, we're looking at layoffs. Damage. It doesn't have to end like this. That's when I knew. Now they were scared. Not when I was being underpaid. Not when I sent 5 separate internal flags. Not when I asked for a meeting and got ghosted. Now, when their contract was on ice and procurement was chewing drywall trying to figure out how to reverse engineer 10 years of operational threading, I built with my bare hands. I opened a drawer, pulled out a small white card. No logo, just a name and a number. I slid it across the table. My legal representative. All correspondence goes through her now. Raj didn't reach for it right away, just stared. Owen, he said, don't you want to come back? Be part of the solution? I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, not angry, not triumphant, just done. I was the solution, I said. Melissa picked up the card like it might explode. They stood, slowly, no handshakes. Raj glanced back at the door before they left. If you change your mind, I won't, I said, but you'll change your policies. And then I closed the door, didn't slam it, didn't lock it with flair, just turned the handle and walked back to the table where my tea had gone cold and the silence finally sounded like peace. The boardroom was colder than usual. Not temperature, tone, as if someone had turned the air to glass and every word threatened to crack it. The CEO sat at the far end, flanked by Stacy from HR, who looked like she hadn't slept since Tuesday, and Kenneth, the company's lead counsel, flipping nervously through a printed copy of Clause 14D like he could somehow redact reality by squinting at it. Across from them sat the board, 6 suits, 2 remote logins, one outside investor from Chicago who didn't bother muting his exhale when Kenneth tried to summarize the situation in softer terms. As of this morning, Kenneth began, our sole source status with the Department of Logistics remains in suspended review. Per clause language authored during the 2018 renewal cycle, reversion was triggered by a verified internal compensation deviation of over 60%. 85, one of the board members cut in, tapping the report. Not 60, 85. Let's not soften it. The CEO shifted. We weren't made aware of the disparity until... Another board member raised a hand. You were copied on the initial equity concern from Owen Delaney multiple times. That email chain was internal noise, the CEO replied too quickly. We get flagged on a dozen process anomalies a week. No one raised this as an urgent. It was urgent, the woman from finance snapped, because it was compliant, because it was federal, because it was signed. She turned the clause summary around so everyone could read it again. And there it was, in plain black and white. Authorized vendor liaison, Owen Delaney authority, reversion trigger execution removal requires signed reassignment or board-level override. No one had ever reassigned him. No one even remembered he'd signed the clause. That's how buried he was in their minds. He was the guy who knew all the vendor ports by memory, who tracked customs freeze dates in his head, who remembered which federal officer had food allergies when they came for audits. And now he was the man with his name etched into a contract they couldn't bypass. The outside investor leaned forward, hands folded like he was about to cut someone open with politeness. Let me ask a basic question, he said. Did any of you read this clause before this week? Silence. Did any of you verify whether signatory authority had been reassigned before finalizing the March comp cycle? More silence. Did anyone in HR or legal respond to his emails? Stacy cleared her throat. We logged his concerns as part of general morale feedback, not formal grievance. Morale? The investor asked, voice sharp now. You called a federal compliance clause a morale issue. The CEO tried to pivot. Look, we've had several legacy oversights from before our current restructuring. Don't you dare blame this on legacy, someone else snapped. He's still here. He was never gone. You just stopped seeing him. Across the table, another director quietly slid a tablet toward the chairwoman. On it, the current federal vendor registry, active vendor contact, Owen Delaney, authorized signatory, Owen Delaney, contract veto rights, not reassigned clause. 14D, active review, status, suspended, under audit. The chairwoman's lips thinned as she read. So what we have, she said slowly, is an authorized employee whom you undercompensated by 85%, initiating a valid contractual action based on a clause he authored, which the board was never informed of, and which now puts $48 million in annual revenue under federal freeze. The CEO looked pale. We're exploring remedies. She set the tablet down. Your remedy was Owen Delaney. And you discarded him. No one said the last part aloud, but it echoed anyway. The lobby smelled like a new carpet and clean power. Quiet hum of recessed lights overhead. No receptionist chatter, no bad jazz from a tinny speaker. Just calm, controlled, efficient. The kind of place where things happened on purpose. Owen stepped through the security gate without fanfare, his new badge clicking softly against his shirt pocket. White background, blue text, Senior Systems Liaison, Federal Subcontractor Division. No onboarding manual, no sticky notes with smiley faces. Just a folder with 5 active contracts and a corner office with frosted glass that read his name correctly on the first try. He didn't gloat. Didn't even glance at the monitor that showed internal metrics and live contract feeds, until he saw the ticker. It wasn't even the headline that got him. It was the phrasing. Breaking. Company name. CEO placed on indefinite leave. Amid contract audit. Federal procurement freeze remains in effect. Pending clause 14D resolution. Right below it, the company's own compliance portal now showed a public-facing banner in thick red text. Under active federal audit, contractual priority suspended. The press statement was dry, sanitized, words like review, clarification, legacy documentation discrepancies. But beneath it all, everyone in the industry knew exactly what it meant. They'd pulled the wrong thread. The woman at the adjacent desk, mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, sharp eyes, glanced over and said, "You used to be at that firm, right?" He nodded once. "A long time ago." "What happened there?" He didn't answer immediately, just reached into his bag, pulled out a flash drive, and slotted it into the dock without breaking eye contact with the screen. "I asked for parity," he said finally. "They gave me a shrug." She raised a brow. "And now?" He tapped the screen gently, where the audit banner blinked like a strobe behind corporate silence. Now they know what that costs. In another room, someone was dialing their legal team. Somewhere else, procurement was running simulations on what it would take to recover the vendor status. It wouldn't be fast, wouldn't be clean, because they'd built everything on the assumption that Owen Delaney would keep swallowing it, that he'd never leave, never push, never leverage the documents they thought were beneath them. He hadn't made noise, he'd made precision. And when he walked away, he took not just the knowledge, but the keys they forgot he ever held. On the lobby TV, another headline scrolled across. Former federal liaison joined subcontractor managing 230 man-hours in new procurement flows. No fanfare, no interviews, just consequence. He sipped his coffee, watched the screen flicker, then said to no one in particular, with a faint smile creeping in like a razor under velvet, "Market rates," they said. A pause. "Yeah, let's talk market consequences."